I'm sorry. Roxy is too damn cute. She was too damn cute in episode 21 of Mushoku Tensei's second season. My gosh, every shot with her. I don't know, call it bias, but it really does feel like this episode. I mean, lately, obviously, the series has been getting a lot better visually, despite my issues with part one of season two. They're stepping it up. But I don't know. There's a side of me that kind of thinks the moment they got to this segment, they're like, hey, we got to step it up even more. Roxy's here. The goddess is finally here. We got to step up the animation because, yeah, she looked great. Fantastic scenes with her. And I think this episode did really, really well in covering the novel series. There's obviously a lot of stuff around the monsters, the labyrinth itself, a lot of the mechanics of the labyrinth, and some dangerous choices they could have made. There's some insight into Paul and Ghislaine and the rest of the party from back in the day. There's a lot of little tidbits here and there. They even kind of swap some stuff around with Talhand having a mages meeting, if you even want to call it that. They replaced it with a cute scene with Roxy going shopping with Rudeus to sort of tell a lot of this kind of exposition information in an interesting way. So there's a lot of stuff that was skipped or bypassed or kind of swapped around. But overall, this episode really did nail it. But yeah, absolutely loved it. Again, and yes, a lot of that has to do with the fact that I love Roxy. And again, I think they really, really nailed her character and the cuteness. But we can all, yes, point out that this episode really is where we see the clueless Rudeus return, which I think in the novel series, it did really jump out at me how much this whole segment here is doing two different things that I'm not so much sure that the anime sort of covered it, but it's really almost feels like Rudeus going back to his old self. Now that he's in the presence of his master again, somebody that he really hasn't been around and seen since he was a kid, he starts to act like a dumb kid again. And it sort of does kind of dredge up that clueless protagonist, because I don't know if we're all missing it here, or if anybody's missing it here. Roxy's getting some doki dokis here. Again, her whole dream was to meet that dreamboat in a dungeon, and they fight together. He rescues her, the Prince Charming. They fight together to get back out of the labyrinth. Rudeus is that, and she's obviously blushing all the time and looking up at him, all cute under the rim of her hat. And Rudeus is not picking up the signs. I mean, the whole Nanahoshi comment at the very end is proof enough. Wait, is that your lover? Yeah, it's like, Rudeus, are you not picking up on this? And yes, in the anime, Paul is a lot more obvious about this. In the novel, it kind of gives a hint that Paul is talking about something that he doesn't really want to bring up now because it might cause friction in the party. Some drama that could cause them to mess up. But in the anime, it's very clear. Like, it cuts over to Roxy. Paul is picking up on this. Rudeus is not. Roxy is doki dokiing over you. What are you going to do here, Rudeus? I like how, yes, the sword comment is anime original. And that even cements it more. I have two swords, Rudeus. I have two swords, Rudeus. It is blatantly obvious, and yeah, he's not picking up on it. He's very much so becoming like a clueless protagonist again. And again, he's kind of dropping back to his old age. He's being goofy. He's being childish, and it makes sense. This person that he's looked up to for so long is now in his presence again. He's kind of reverting back to being the little people. That's what he's turning into. So anyways, with all that said, let's just dive into this, my impression/skip content video. So if you're anime only, this is the place to be. Yes, I do admit they did go back and cover Roxy stuck in the labyrinth. Now, at first, when I was watching the beginning of the episode, I kind of got a little scared there, like, oh crap, I messed up. Because it's always the case with doing these skip content videos. You don't know sometimes when they want to rearrange things. But thankfully, I don't feel bad because they barely covered it. I mean, even the room that it showed her in before she decides to step out there, that room was tiny in the novel series. Like, it was enough, I think that they said that it's enough room to, like, lay down in. It's not even enough room. Like, it shows massive in the anime. But yeah, it shows how she went around, she marked the walls, but that's about it. So I didn't feel too bad about covering that last time, but that's always the case with these skip content videos. Sometimes things can be rearranged. I mentioned that with the whole thing of them revealing to Paul that Elise is technically now married into the family, or not married in the family. Sylphie is married in the family, which makes Elise part of their family. They still haven't covered that. And you never know when they actually might do that. So that's always a warning there. But yes, let's jump into this. Let's dive into this impression/skip content video. Yes, like I said, opening up the episode, we have the scene where Roxy's walking around the dungeon. She's marking the walls. She's noticing that she's kind of coming back into the same locations over and over again. And yeah, it did a pretty decent job of kind of showing how this is all laying out. Again, it does kind of cut a lot of the aspects about, yes, the monsters are kind of setting up traps and stuff. They're blockading things. all to the point where she feels like she's not going to make it through this, and she's regretting it because she wants to become a teacher. So it kind of covered all that stuff. Like I said, I have a whole coverage of that entire chapter in the previous skip content video, so go check that out if you want more full context. But yes, I was really happy to see that, yes, Rudeus, they did cover Rudeus puking. That was great. Just literally come up there, getting that big whiff, that embrace, that big whiff, and then eventually going, hey, I don't know who you are. You know, my name's Roxy Perspective. Who are you? And he's like, wait, you don't know where I am? Oh, did I meet you before? I'm sorry. Puke. Which, yes, does technically lead into the next part, which is, yes, Talhand having to carry him away. They didn't really get into details with it, but yes, in the novel series, it kind of gets into how Rudeus is super jealous of Talhand. Like, this guy, his dirty hands cannot touch the goddess Roxy. Seeing Roxy in that condition, Geese called for an immediate withdrawal. Heading to the entrance, Talhand carried Roxy. Of course, Rudeus suggested that he carry her holiness, but they needed his spells. He did debate if it was acceptable for such an unclout brute to carry Roxy. But no one else protested, Roxy included. Roxy then apologized to Talhand for stinking, but he said he couldn't call himself an adventurer if he was bothered by it. They sort of imply in the anime that he's more saying, like, I owe you kind of thing. Like, I have to pay you back eventually, which, yes, makes sense because, again, this entire time they've been diving this dungeon, Talhand hasn't been too useful. Roxy's been much more useful because of her, you know, the spells that she can use. Rudeus knew that Roxy and Talhand and the others traveled for a long time together. The way they spoke to each other, he knew that they trusted each other deeply. It made Rudeus jealous. He's like, I wish I could have traveled around with Roxy all the time. But yeah, that's when they brought up the whole thing with, you know, puking and how he was, like, confused, and it led to him puking because she didn't know who he was, and he was also really happy at the time. But still, her saying that, you know, I didn't recognize you because I was comparing you to the old, adorable Rudy, that, of course, brought him to pretty much heaven. He said, but hearing her voice after such a long time filled him with such joy. He could fly right up to heaven. No, heaven's with you, Rudeus. The goddess is with you. But yeah, once they got back to the inn, everybody's obviously super overjoyed. It did get into the details that, yes, Roxy was immediately taken to the bath by Lilia. Rudeus hovered outside hoping to help, but Viera shooed him away. He didn't have any ulterior motive, honestly, despite his previous offense. He thought about defending his case, but it was fine. He knew that if he seen her cloth sitting there, he would slip a white fabric into his pocket. He couldn't give his perverted side an opportunity. Right now, his feelings were innocent. I did like that they actually had him peeking in on her, but I was waiting for VR to show up and shoo him away. Like, go away, Rudeus. Go away. Stop hovering around her. But yeah, she rested for a few days. She didn't have any major injuries. She just needed some food and to, you know, get some sleep. Rudeus felt like he screwed up and behaved shamefully in front of her. He hoped she wasn't disillusioned with him. Barfing was disrespectful. But he was in a shock about her forgetting him. Despite constantly thinking of her when they were apart, he wondered if Sylphie felt the same way. He should apologize to her when they returned. And again, it makes sense because the last time they seen each other, he was a little boy. And yes, because Roxy's a Magurdian, she hasn't changed at all. So she's easily recognizable. Rudeus is completely different. He's grown up. But yeah, that's when Roxy comes back out there and she's fully recovered. Cute little moment. Everybody's super happy that she's back. She's apologizing. She even brings up how she's addressing Rudeus, which he wants to go back to calling me Rudy. That was super cute. The moment she kind of slaps her face and turns to him and says, okay, Rudy. It was super cute. And yes, Paul has to bring up the comment that Rudeus made. I sense God nearby. And then started pounding through the walls. Yes, the novel doesn't get into explain that whole ordeal. Again, it plays out pretty much like the anime, where Rudeus at some point goes, and he looks over, and then suddenly it cuts over to Roxy's perspective. He shows up, saves her, and then we don't find out until right here that, yes, Rudeus said, literally, I sense God nearby, and plowed through the walls. Plow through the walls. They do technically get into, I think here in a minute, if I remember correctly, here what we'll get into, there's this idea that Roxy could have technically been in a separate area. Because some of these teleporters are random, she could have been shot into an area, like a one-way trip into an area that you can't get back. Again, she spent a month in there constantly trying to figure out which teleporter would take her out. And she was being methodical about it. She was marking things. But she never got out of that location. So the idea here is that she might have been in a separate area that you cannot get out of. And so Rudeus had essentially plowing through the walls to get to her was going to be the only way they would get to her. So it is kind of interesting in that regard. But yeah, Paul made him out to sound like a nutcase. But he somehow knew exactly where she was, and she was in trouble. He made a beeline to her voice without regard for danger and tunnels collapsing. Each wall he smashed through. He didn't know how he knew that she was in trouble, he just did. It was their bond drawing them together. Maybe it was a slight chance the man god had intervened. But Rudeus disregarded that. There was only one god he believed in. Maybe God guided him there. Then there was nothing strange about it at all. But yeah, here's in the novel series where we start to get that sense that there's something going on with Roxy. I mean, it was, like I said before, she's getting Doki Doki. The moment that he showed up, the Prince Charming, it's been flagging that for a while now. But here it's like she's just kind of blushing constantly. She's blinking all the time. She's kind of looking away. And he's just constantly going, does she have a fever? Does she have a fever? It's like, dude, clueless protagonist. But yeah, talking to her once again brought back memories to him. Precious memories. Roxy then commented on the spell that he used in order to save her, and assumed that it was Emperor Tier. But it was a simple Frost Nova, not Absolute Zero that she assumed. He was simply mimicking the magic that Talhand had told him that Roxy was using. However, he was hesitant to correct her. Being that she was a water magic specialist, it would be a shame if she discovered she misinterpreted his spell. He could tell her in private later, but would she react negatively to that? This is kind of implying here that yes, when Roxy was kind of protecting herself in that labyrinth, she was splashing things with water and then freezing them over. And it was just freezing the outside. So the moment that he uses pretty much the same thing that Talhand told him that she was using, he froze everything solid. So she assumes that it's an Emperor Tier. Like it's a much higher tier spell. But it's not. It's the same one. And we've kind of implied here all the way up to this point, especially Stone Cannon. Again, Bodygotti claimed that his Stone Cannon was so powerful because he's infusing it and adjusting it and making it super powerful that it could be claimed as an Emperor Tier spell. But it's not. And he doesn't want to correct her in front of everybody and make her look bad because she's a water specialist and technically his teacher. He doesn't want to make her look bad. So he's like, I'll tell her later. That's when Talhand spoke up. Nah, that was Frost Nova. It just had more power behind it than the one that you use. Roxy replied, oh, so that's it. My apologies. Emily said, honestly, Roxy, you haven't changed at all. Though I do agree with you. It wouldn't strike me as strange in the least for Rudeus to use Emperor Tier magic. After all, he is considered the most powerful magician at the University of Magic. Ellen backed up Roxy, but that last part wasn't necessary. Don't talk me up, dude. My current abilities are all thanks to my teacher's guidance. Roxy said, Rudy, I keep hearing you claiming that, but do you honestly think that's true? Of course I do. They were his foundations. Go outside, talk to people, get along with others, no prejudice, give it your best. They took deep roots in Rudeus. It was how he established his relationship with Rearranging, for example. He couldn't always achieve it. He was human. But what mattered was making it key to his approach of the world. She said, you improved on your own, completely without my teaching. Giving a self-deprecating smile, Roxy continued, you've grown into an incredible man, the complete opposite of a klutz like me, who got herself trapped in a labyrinth. She slumped over on the table with a thud. He could see the top of her scalp, where her hair swirled out from. It was kind of cute. Paul then said, the master is incredible, and so is a student. What could be better? Rudeus commended Paul in his mind. He wasn't special, but Roxy was amazing. So what if she lost to her pupil in a few narrow categories? That wasn't the indicator of a value of a person. Paul continued, if you hadn't been with us, we wouldn't be here. Have a little confidence. His words rallied Roxy's spirits before Geese and the rest returned for their meeting. Yeah, I like this right here because it is another one of those cases where Rudeus is saying, you're amazing, Roxy, and she's going, I'm not that amazing. And I think it's a lot to do with the fact that when Roxy's thinking about if she's amazing compared to Rudeus, it's in spells, capability. But when Rudeus is thinking about it, it's the fact that she saved his life. And his life is more valuable than spells. She brought me out into the world. She taught me things about life. Not spells, things about life. Yes, this is when they bring up the fact that they want to get Roxy right back in there. And I do like that whole idea of the PTSD of the labyrinth itself. The idea that if you nearly die in the labyrinth and you don't return quickly, you're going to be filled with fear and be unable to do anything. They feel like it's a curse. Like it's an actual curse thing. Whereas Rudeus is obviously going to put it into the perspective of, yeah, it's probably like PTS. It's probably a mental thing. Plus, additionally, Geese wanted Rudeus to get back in there quickly so that he can keep getting experience. After that, each one of them jumped in for comments. Roxy offered pointers on doubling as a healing and offensive magician. Paul was against Rudeus' method of punching through walls to navigate. They were all taking this seriously. Weakened, they were still S-rank. Their new focus was mapping out the third floor, then find the circle to the fourth floor. Typically, groups would find the entrance to the following floor before taking a rest, and then returning with a direct route. If you weren't quick enough, there was a possibility of the number of traps increasing. Speed was crucial. Paul and Geese discussed how the book mentioned that the fourth floor changed in some sort of runes. There was instances of long existing labyrinths combining into a single one, containing two centers, or two hearts with magically imbued crystals. It was a possibility that the Teleportation Labyrinth was a similar case, having a similar layout, changing partway through. According to the book, the Teleportation Labyrinth only had one magic crystal. It may have originally been an ordinary labyrinth that merged with some old ruins to take its current form. And that pretty much is sort of implied at the end of this episode of the anime, that this ruins, the last teleporter they get to, it's essentially looks like the teleportation ruin that he brought to get here. So he went to those ruins to get to Begret. And he immediately said, okay, the layout feels similar. It doesn't quite do the same thing as in the novel series, because the novel series does sort of show you those previous rooms, or at least talks about those previous rooms leading up to the last room. And it's laid out the same as the teleportation ruins. So the assumption here could be that possibly these labyrinths at some point merged into a teleportation ruins. Speaking of ruins, there was also ones containing the teleportation circles they used to get here. Roxy then questioned about the book. After Geese explained about it, she planned to read it the next day. With that in mind, Rudeus grew excited about staying nearby to answer any questions. Geese then had them reform the party layout. Talhand suggested that Roxy would take up the rear. Rudeus would support her. Feeling that he was calm for his age, he could use his eye of foresight and his wits to stop something before it goes wrong. Rudeus wanted to protest. He made it sound as if she was lacking composure. But it did give him an excuse to keep his eye on Roxy, as Eye of Foresight only worked on what he could see. Additionally, Elise and Paul would be swapping places. Talhand would be defending the rear. Their new formation was Geese as scout, Paul and Elise as vanguard, middle was Talhand, and the rear was Roxy and Rudeus. With all this in mind, Rudeus spoke up. All right then, I look forward to working with you, teacher. Roxy responded, yes, and I as well. I'll do my best not to hold you back. Rudeus honestly felt like he'd be holding her back. He really wished that she'd be more confident. Sure, he had more mana and spell usage, but stats and strength wasn't the sum of one's worth. True power was gained by experience, and Roxy was ahead of him in that regard, spending a whole month fighting in the labyrinth, only to recover in a few days, ready to go back as if nothing happened. That is technically a big thing. But again, this kind of shows that sign that Rudeus acknowledged that Roxy has more experience. And we'll get here in a minute, this idea that she technically has much more at her disposal. She's using all of her cards. If he got stuck in the labyrinth like she did, experiencing something that horrific, he'd probably swear to never enter the labyrinth again. A wise Japanese proverb stated, "A wise man stays away from danger. Call him a chicken if you want." He knew he was a coward. And you're alive. Geese then gave his orders to the waiting party, as well as consulted Shiera about Roxy's condition. He also had Shiera prepare medical supplies necessary for Zenith's rescue. He also entrusted Lilia with overseeing the tasks he had given out. It seemed that Geese was a leader of the Labyrinth party. Lilia was for the waiting party, and Paul was the overall leader of the group. Paul's position was to oversee all final decision-making and keep track of everyone. Paul had everyone prepare for 3 days from now, before dismissing everyone. Yeah, this is where we cut over to Rudeus hovering over Roxy, waiting to see if there's something that she has a question about. Is that whole idea of the taught becoming the teacher kind of thing. Oh yeah, I get to teach her something now. But again, it was cute. I think they kind of pulled off the cute little pose, because this is the point in which we have a little bit of artwork from the light novel where Rudeus is sitting next to Roxy, and you have that perspective of him looking at her, and she's just kind of looking up all cute. And yes, he even contemplated the idea that it would be so great to have her sit on his lap so he can wrap his arms around her, but that would probably make her bad. She obviously has an issue with her size. That's when we cut back to the labyrinth. Resuming their exploration of the labyrinth, they made a beeline for the 3rd floor, facing mud skulls, dead road tarantulas, and iron crawlers. The mud skulls were slow, but durable, and shrugged off blows dealt upon it. It slung mud and used a spell similar to Stone Cannon. Those reasons didn't make it an A rank, but rather because it was quite intelligent, capable of issuing commands to lesser monsters, leading them into formation. So that explains why whenever you see them, you're often seeing all the iron crawlers kind of in a formation before it. Very clean formation in the anime. It's because of that. Again, showing how intelligent they are. Due to Paul having difficulty in the 2nd floor, this dynamic formation made it difficult for them to search the 3rd floor. Now that they had Roxy and Rudeus, Rudeus would be handling the mud skulls, while Roxy faced the iron crawlers. Paul and the rest would handle everything else. Mud skulls were weak against water and fire, but Rudeus' stone cannon worked fine. Again, that kind of shows the aspect that he's putting so much addition to those stone cannons that it's doing more than what normal stone cannons do. He used Eye of Foresight to snipe them in their skull weak point. Roxy gave off a sigh after the battle. Rudeus could see part of her face peek out from beneath her hat. She returned his gaze, glancing up sideways before averting her eyes. That cute look up. She didn't ask for rest, being low on mana, so the party returned to the main passageway to take a break. While Rudeus was only at half mana, since he was only using Stone Cannon, Roxy was using Frost Nova, so it was no surprise that she was running out faster. She apologized for having such a small mana pool, but Rudeus assured her that she had more than enough. Her use of magic was exceptionally precise, slinging spells in a narrow area without missing. Occasionally, Water Cascade would splash Paul or the others, but her Icicle Field was on point. Precision required an appropriate amount of mana as well. Despite that, she went on fighting for quite a while. By no means did she have a small mana pool. It was likely the same size as Sylphie, if not larger. Which, yes, technically makes sense, because we mentioned this before. When they got Julie, the idea was to get a very young person because they can build up their mana pool. Because at some point in their life, their mana pool will stop growing. And it kind of makes you wonder with a Magurdian, despite the fact that Roxy is 40 years old in the world itself, or more than 40 years old, it might be that that is a longer period of time that she can actually develop her mana pool. but we don't know. At this point, 2 days had passed since they went to the 3rd floor. It took the author 5 days to delve this far. They outpaced the author and moved through the 3rd floor several times, mapping it out. Geese was ready to find the magic circle for the 4th floor. Roxy rested her back against Rudeus. He figured that she felt more comfortable rather than using the walls. A side benefit for him. You know, I never thought I'd get a chance to dive Labyrinth with you like this, she said. Rudeus replied, me either. Say, is there anything that I'm doing that I should be more cautious about? She said, huh? You've already got the essentials down when it comes to moving as a group. So, there's no advice I can offer. He said, thank you. Using magic voicelessly, with perfect precision. You're really incredible, she continued. Not at all. He shook his head. I still have much to learn. He was being truthful. Seeing Roxy really made him feel that way. She didn't add to her cards in her hand, but rather increased what she could do with what she had, combining existing items in her arsenal to overwhelm her opponent. He was sure that he did the same in the past, but at some point, he moved to just using Stone Cannon and Quagmire. Again, it's that sign that he's seeing that she's using her entire arsenal very cleverly. Again, the idea of splashing and freezing and putting up a fortification, using ranged attacks to attack the back lines. She's used to fighting alone. Like, she's soloed a lot of labyrinths by herself because she could never find good groups. Or was too full of herself sometimes. It wasn't the best habit, but they were more than enough for weaker opponents. Petty tricks of the sort wouldn't work against stronger enemies he pictured facing. But he had no way of practicing it. He was aiming high, but had nothing tangible in front of him to aim for. Thus, he wasn't improving. So this is kind of a wake-up call for him. I gotta get better. Roxy's like really good. But yeah, that's when Roxy decides to ask Rudeus to let's go on a labyrinth run together. And yeah, not picking up the signs. I mean, it does point out even in the novel series that he notices her kind of, yes. She's like, yes, over there. That was so cute. Yes. But yeah, he's not picking up on the idea. Yeah, she wants to, it's like an asking out on a date thing. When he asked if it was just the two of them, she said, yes, we're quite pressed for time right now, but labyrinth diving can be fun. So how about forming a party with me, just the two of us, and trying out a simpler labyrinth together? Yeah, not an S rank one that the teleportation labyrinth is. Reese thought if it weren't for Geese, he'd probably stepped on a trap by now. Still, if anyone could venture into labyrinth alone, it was Roxy. She had a track record for clumsiness. They might be able to get through it. And yes, he completely forgot. Oh yeah, that's right. I technically have a wife and an incoming child at home. Maybe I won't have time for that. He realized that labyrinth diving took multiple days. He didn't know if he had time to do that while helping child rearing. Perhaps when the child got bigger and they had some free time, it felt nice that Roxy had invited him. It felt that she acknowledged his skills. He had to be careful not to reveal his flaws in front of her. With that, he drifted off to sleep. It's like the entire time he's like moving around with her again, this is my master, and he's like constantly feeling like he has to do, like, I gotta look good. It's like Paul's over here trying to look good in front of his son, and Reese is over here trying to look good in front of his master. After discovering the circle leading to the 4th floor, they finished the map. No signs of Zenith. They moved on. On the 4th floor, the walls resembled the ruins they used to teleport here. Perhaps a similar structure turned to a labyrinth. Paul checked with Geese before deciding to scope out the floor before returning to the surface. Paul seemed pretty suave when he was at work. Maybe Zenith fell for this side of him. With the same blood in his veins, Rudeus wondered if Sylphie wasn't just flattering him when she paid him compliments. That made Rudeus ask Roxy if he was handsome. It's kind of a sad thing because, yes, Rudeus is married and he's literally saying something that is going to obviously beg on another woman to make a comment with him. And it kind of hurts in that regard. It's like, dude, she's already showing Doki Doki signs and now he's like, am I really handsome? It's like, really stop, dude. She responded after peering out from beneath her hat. Oh, well, sure, you're handsome. She fumbled with her words, then quickly averted her eyes again. Okay, he realized by her expression that it was clearly an uncomfortable question. It was rude, and he seemed to have gotten carried away. If Roxy turned cutesy and asked how cute she was on a scale from 1 to 10, he'd raise glow sticks and say 100. There was more to a man than his face. He needed a heart of red-hot flaming steel. Suddenly, Rudeus was alerted to an enemy. 2 armored warriors. Rudeus assumed that his stone cannon would be enough, but then Roxy spoke up. Wait, Rudy, you can't. I've heard that armored warriors use water god style. If you're careless with your magic, they'll counter it right back at us. Yeah, for those who don't remember, the water guard style of swordsmanship is all about counters, parries. It's a more defensive style. Sword god style is all about offense. North god style is about tricks. The water god style is about waiting and countering. So yeah, the idea is that they would send it and it would just deflect it right back at them. This was true. Reese hadn't really encountered it much, but it was a sword style based around deflecting and countering attacks, effective against magic for some reason. He wasn't sure how, but they could counter magic with a flash of a sword. With 4 arms, they might be able to engage 4 people at once and counter every attack. That's when Roxy gives them a call to actually support Elise and Paul. Paul handled them with ease, deflecting incoming attacks with his right sword. severing arms with his left. The monsters were heavily armored, but that apparently didn't matter. Swordsmen of the Sword God style were beasts. Or maybe his short sword was just that sharp. Elise, while not taking much damage, seemed to lack the offense to land a killing blow. Roxy called for Rudeus to release a synchronized attack on Elise's opponent. He agreed before calling Talhand to shield them in case they were countered. If he didn't die instantly, Rudeus could heal him up. It's like, yeah, Talhand, get up there and block us. He had a hope that he would miss vital organs. They cast it at different times, but released at once. Again, because Roxy technically has to still do an incantation, but she has shortened her incantations. The enemy shifted to deflect, but Elise took the opportunity to shield bash it, throwing it off balance and allowing the magic to contact. Both enemies fell at the same time. Paul noted that it wasn't a surprise. These were A-rank monsters, and they wouldn't go down easily. But Rudeus realized that it only lasted a minute. While not a single blow, it wasn't a tough fight. Paul's skill was expected for someone who had achieved the advanced rank in all 3 schools of swordsmanship. Rudeus figured, ability-wise, Paul had it to reach Saint tier. No, he figured that he was as strong as a Saint tier swordsman. Strength couldn't be measured by rank alone. This is something that the series has kind of pointed out several times at this point, is that sometimes titles don't really mean anything. Again, Rudeus is technically using Emperor tier stone cannons. Father, have you gotten stronger than before? It slipped out of Rudeus' mouth. He feared it would boost his ego. Huh? No, not at all. I'm weaker than I used to be. Paul didn't smile, just glanced his way before looking forward. Come on, let's get going. And don't let your guard down. His words were a sobering reminder. They were in a labyrinth right now. Rudeus had to pull himself together. Paul was looking really cool right now. Norman would probably be delighted to see how suave he looked in action. Yes, Norman would probably freak out. What's this? Elise caught a look at Paul's face before covering her mouth and smirking. What's that grin, Paul? It's creepy. Come on, you don't have to make those kind of comments. Are you happy that Rudeus complimented you? Oh, don't worry, I understand. She gave out a laugh. Enough already, shut it. I'm kind of sad that they missed her comments there, but I did like his face when he was walking away in the anime. Nope, Rudeus thought, same old Paul. They fought more armored warriors, then returned to the surface. The route took approximately 5 hours. This was going to take a while. While Rudeus feared that if Zenith could hold out, they couldn't rush. They didn't need another accident like with Roxy. Rudeus was growing nervous, despite it going smoothly. But he didn't feel emotionally overwhelmed. They had to keep at the good pace. Back at Rapon, they held a meeting. Rudeus would draw up more spirit scrolls, which thankfully materials were readily available. He simply had to draw a reference, and Shira would handle the rest. She was quite skilled at it, having previously worked drawing scrolls for the Mills Church. She promised to have 50 copies made within a day. Geese then purchased chemicals, which was supposedly effective against armored monsters. If aimed right, it apparently coiled around the joints and slowed them down. Rudeus suggested using oil on the ground to make them lose their footing, but Geese laughed, saying Paul would land on his ass. Yeah, this is kind of, like I said earlier, this is where they kind of rearranged things and instead had that whole shopping scene with Roxy mentioning these kind of things. Right there, she's mentioning that, yeah, Shira can draw them up and make copies for you because she used to work for the Mills Church making copies of scrolls. And yes, right here, Geese is laughing about the oil. Which again, I kind of like the little shopping scene. Again, I'm a Roxy fan. Paul and Elise went shopping for a new weapon for Elise. Her Estoc was able to create a vacuum, but it wasn't suited against armored warriors. This is where we get into the short sword that Paul wielded, which again, the anime for some reason doesn't want to talk about. The short sword that he wielded was a magic item purchased in Rapon. It had a steel cutting ability. The tougher the opponent, the sharper it became. It was a rare ability, so much so that the people in the market hadn't been able to identify it. They treated it like a dull butter knife and sold it for pennies. Paul claimed his keen eyesight helped him see the true power, but Rudeus knew better. He read The Legend of Pedagoose back in the Buena Village. There was a warrior whose weapon carried the same skill. Paul knew the moment that he heard the line about it not cutting through dried meat. It made sense why the blade, even in his weaker hand, was so powerful. Elise purchased a single gladius. It apparently had the ability to emit a shockwave when thrusted forward. It didn't do much damage, but allowed them to gain distance while sending them backwards. It costed quite a bit, but Elise exchanged a magically imbued crystal. Rudeus wondered how many of those she had. That night, Rudeus was invited to go drinking with Roxy and Talhand. Rudeus tagged along, but he felt like he couldn't chug alcohol in front of Roxy. I gotta look good. It would be a meeting between 3 magicians, but it turned into Professor Talhand lecturing them on what it takes to be a real man. Men were supposed to have muscles. Superb muscles meant superb spirit. It wasn't conversation for magicians, but Rudeus agreed with it. Men should be brawny and strong. Roxy, on the other hand, drowsily sat through it. She couldn't have been less interested, not that Rudeus could blame her. Yeah, we missed the Talhand lecture. It's not a long lecture, though. But yeah, I did like the market scene with Roxy. It was super cute. Her just looking up at the jar and all that stuff. And then that little shock face when they find Elisa's new weapon. The next day, Lilia bid them farewell, and they dove back into the labyrinth. Journey to the 4th floor was a smooth one, due do the preparations and change of gear. They were also lucky, taking them 3 hours and almost no run-ins with monsters. Once there, they continued to map the 4th floor. But to no one's surprise, Zenith was nowhere to be found. Still good in supplies, they proceeded to the 5th floor. Here, armored warriors were joined by devouring devils. They briefly show the devouring devils. I was actually surprised. I'm like, oh, that was it? That was it? Like, there's like an entire nest later on in the novel series, like just before they get to that room with the 3 teleporters. Devouring Devils was a demon with a giant mouth and razor-sharp fangs. It also had long limbs and pointed claws that allowed them to scale the ceiling, not unlike an alien from a certain movie. It was formidable, being able to render the formation completely useless by crawling on the ceilings and the walls. It would pass by Paul and Elise, who engaged the armored warrior and attacked the back line. The sight sent chills down Rudeus' spine. That said, they weren't that strong. Quick and powerful-looking attacks, but it had low defense and didn't put up much of a fight. Rudeus was shocked by it at first, but after batting it off the wall, Elise dove her weapon into it, ending it. While it had unusual movement patterns, and it was an A rank, once they grew accustomed to it, the armored warriors were a more difficult opponent. Still, keeping track of them meant that you had to keep your eyes off the ground for traps and opponents ahead. Yeah, it's technically true. It kind of distracts you. Fortunately, the book had a trick. Roots of Talfro tree, which were sold for consumption. That's the little roots that they bought at the market and they burn it. Burnt, it would send the devils descending from the ceilings as they hated the smell. They would also try to escape from the smoke. This made him closer to a C rank. The author really did his research. With that, they cleared the 5th floor in no time at all. Discovering the 6th floor entrance, Geese gave clear to keep on going, hardly using any other supplies. They would proceed onward. On the 6th floor, it was covered in devouring devils, armored warriors having disappeared entirely. While the incense helped, there was far too many of them. So many that you had to ask why they were so numerous. The answer came when they reached the deepest part of the 6th floor. There was a room leading to the next magic circle, which was a nest. A swarm of beasts crowded within it, and countless eggs sat on the edges. They were oblong, slimy, and not unlike cockroaches. It sent a chill down Rudeus' spine. He thought maybe a queen was somewhere nearby, using Zenith to birth eggs. Though he knew there wasn't an indication that devouring devils did that. They swarmed together, but didn't seem to have anything resembling a queen. Rudeus wondered what their purpose was, and now they have food to support them all. Asking Roxy, she said there was a theory about them feeding off the mana. That would make sense, again, this idea that the mana is constantly flowing into the center of the labyrinth. So where would the devouring devils be? Well, possibly beyond here, where the crystal is. Forests and caves had a high concentration of mana, as well as monsters. And Anahoshi did mention magical energy could be found in all things throughout the world. Using Eye of Magical Power, one could confirm this. With them not feeding off his spells, it could mean that there was a magic power that could and couldn't be consumed. Paul also told Rudeus long ago that the monsters were attracted to a magically imbued crystal at the heart of a labyrinth. Was it really that enticing? Why were they all staying here and not delving deeper? Instead, they just created a nest. Good point. There wasn't any point pondering that now. They were monsters, just like armored warriors that clearly didn't consume anything. He'd leave the question to the experts. So cool. It's so cool. I like these little tidbits of the world and how it works. Roxy spoke up. Well, no matter what they consumed, it doesn't change the fact that they attack humans on sight. Let's destroy those eggs as we find them, or they'll be a thorn in our side when we next return. Roxy said this coolly as she stabbed them with her short sword. Her expression was a very definition of indifference. He liked that side of her too. With monsters producing eggs, he wondered if armored warriors had offspring. He pictured a mini version of them, the size of a felt doll, carrying a toy sword, being looked after by armored mommy and armored daddy. Then Paul appears before them, face of a demon, brutally murdering his parents with a weapon effective against them. The child witnessed this and learns humans are the enemy. He grows up and morphs into a beast that attacks humans on sight. Yeah, okay, that thought was ridiculous. The story of the armored warrior child and his revenge. But yeah, they cleared the way. There was 3 other rooms that were stuffed the same way. None of the eggs hatched. If they did, a larva would cling to a human that it saw. The cleanup was uneventful, without a newly hatched larva trying to cling to Roxy's crotch. Jeez, dude. Finally, they arrived at the depths of the labyrinth, the very place written about in the last pages of the book. A spacious square room constructed of stone, 3 magic circles near one wall, facing away from the entrance. Other than that, it was completely empty, despite the room before being swarmed with devouring devils, almost like it was a holy ground where nothing dared enter. Only one room described it. Abnormal. Emily spoke up. It's the Guardian. Paul replied, it does give off that vibe. Keep your wits about you, Roxy said. They all kept their weapons close. Perhaps it was common for the room before the boss's lair to have an unsettling vibe. Well, which one's going to be? Geese then investigated the circle with a book in his hand. Everyone else stood by the entrance. Rudeus assisted him, having helped create summon circles before. For some reason, Roxy scuttled behind him. Her presence was reassuring. The book stated, there were 3 magic circles. We knew immediately that 2 of these were random teleportation circles, so we used a stone to mark one that we thought was correct, and hopped on. However, this was a trap. I was transported to an unfamiliar place, finding myself trapped between tightly packed black, slimy bodies. That's right, a devouring devil's nest. The moment they saw me, I'll spare you the details of the battle that followed. Rudeus spotted the stone they used as a sign. It was a beautifully polished fist-sized rock, the number 6 carved into it. Rudeus spoke up. Makes you feel emotional seeing it, doesn't it? He said, think so? I say it's just bad luck. Listen here, boss. Things like this, items left behind by a dead party, they're bad luck. A jinx? Yeah, that's right, a jinx. Okay, but it's not like their whole party was wiped out. The circles perfectly resembled the 2-way circles they used to travel numerous times. Yet, this one's different. Stepping on it would randomly teleport you, or perhaps you didn't have to step on it. Once activated, it could warp everything within the room. Which, yes, kind of explains why possibly the Devouring Devils don't go in there. That's when Roxy steps up to ask if he knew what was going on there, and yes, he mentions Nanahoshi. She freaks out. Could it be your lover? Nanahoshi? No way. As Rudeus laughed to himself, he wished Nanahoshi was here. Maybe Sylphie or even Cliff. While the first 2 were impossible, maybe he should have brought Cliff after all. Rudeus could go fetch him, but that would take 3 months. 4 since he wasn't accustomed to travel. Still, he might not know the answer. Rudeus then spoke up to Roxy. Actually, I did some research in teleportation at the university, but I'm embarrassed to say that I can't make heads or tails of this. You researched teleportation? Yeah, I see. I should have expected that much from you, Rudy. Not everyone can think to pin a problem down to its source rather than searching blindly for answers. She misunderstood. He was just listening to the man god. It wasn't something he could share, since his motives were impure. Yeah, I was actually told by the man god, and I was actually just looking for a way to fix my junk. Rudeus then followed up. Well, it's an obvious conclusion to come to. As a pupil of a great teacher, Roxy. You can praise me all you want, but you won't get anything for it. In the end, he had nothing. Admitting this to Geese, most of his knowledge came from that book. It didn't have an answer. It was beyond him. All he knew, based on this time with Nanahoshi, was that the 3 circles were abnormal. The smallest change could alter its effects. They sat at the entrance of the room in a circular formation. Reporting the situation, Paul clicked his tongue. 2A. Emily said, 2 options. Talhand said, damn it, 2. He said 2 options are really gonna screw us. It'd be better if we had 3. It was like this whole routine they had. Back at Paul's old party, every time they ran into 2 options, it was always Ghislaine that made the choice. Guy said when we only had 2 choices, we gotta let Ghislaine choose, or whatever we do, it'll end up in failure. Everyone nodded in agreement. That was nostalgic for Rudeus. As a beast folk, she certainly had a good sense of smell to sniff out the correct answer. Paul followed up, Ghislaine. If only she was here now. Emily spoke up. She was only ever useful in times like this. Then Talhand spoke. She never listened to instructions during battle and ran in head first, almost like she didn't understand a word anyone said. She couldn't read, write, or do arithmetic, and she'd get enraged any time he talked about something she didn't understand. But at least, when we only had 2 options, she was weirdly able to pick out the right one. Rudeus felt bad for Ghislaine. She was one of the teachers he'd respected. Rudy spoke up. Please, give her a break. She can now read, write, and do arithmetic. Talhand gave off a humph. I heard about that from Paul before, but I won't be fooled. There's no way that pup can function like a normal person. I heard the very same thing, but to be honest, I can't believe it either, Emily said. Rudeus wasn't shocked about them being skeptical. She had been a bonehead. It was strange, though. All of Paul's former party members were here, except for Ghislaine. Anyways, they inquired on what they were going to do now. They decided to take up a vote. Paul, Elise, and Roxy voted right. Geese, Talhand, and Rudeus voted left. They couldn't even decide that way. At that point, Elise decided to send one person to each circle at the same time, but one would be a sacrifice. Elise figured that Paul and her can use incense and slice their way through the devouring devils. One would come back, and they would search for the other. But Rudeus opposed this. There was no guarantee that either one of them was the right answer. They both seemed randomized by appearance. They might both be traps, meaning all 3 were traps. It was possible the correct circle was elsewhere. The author in the book even searched everywhere. Trusting the author, this was their final destination. But the position and the shapes, all of it felt deliberate and deceptive. Something was off. Why make a trap that had a 50-50 chance of success? It wouldn't be a trap. If it was as simple as one being correct, why bother having 3 to begin with? When Elise asked what they should do, Rudeus wanted a little time to think before they made a decision. Rudeus really felt like he was forgetting something. Until he could recall that, simply stepping on one of them on the assumption of a 50-50 chance was too dangerous. There was also the danger of everyone being randomly teleported once it was activated. Yeah, they wanted to send Paul this one and Ellis on this one and see if one of them goes to that location and they'll come back and then they'll figure out, okay, one of them disappeared and that might be the right one. But there's a fear that if they step on one of them, it can send the entire room. That's why it kind of assuming the reason why those devouring devils aren't even in there. Pondering, Rudeus started with the premise that all of them were dummies. With that in mind, there was 3 possibilities. First, this wasn't the endpoint. The book said the labyrinth had one internal rule, that the main route through the maze was through 2-way circles. Following that logic, this had to be the final destination. However, Roxy was an area not accessible with the 2-way circle. To get back to the main path, you had to find your way through 30 one-way circles, meaning the end of it was beyond a one-way circle. But he felt the chances were slim. Second possibility, unbeknownst to the author, another party member triggered a trap before they entered the portal, meaning he chose the right one. That was unlikely the case, because Geese would have spotted the trap. Third possibility, the 2-way circle was actually a double circle. Portals came in a lot of shapes. Maybe one was a donut shaped. That's interesting, having a teleportation circle and then there's another one that's around it. If so, the correct one may be surrounded by a trap. They just had to step on the center. No, that was stupid. The first option was most likely. The author only ever stepped on the 2-way circle. Perhaps from here onward, you had to proceed by a 1-way circle. There could even be a circle on the 4th floor that led them to the final point. Damn it, things just got complicated. The author even divided up the floors, which was arbitrary to begin with. He had done this separation based on the monsters alone. The unique rule about 2-way portals might have been pure coincidence. It made Rudeus think, should they start from the beginning and hit each one way again? This seemed like the correct choice. But the veteran members of this party immediately sensed a guardian close. This place had to be special, but maybe that was one of the labyrinth's traps. Muttering about the endless possibilities, Rudeus stood up for a bathroom break. Father? What is it? I'm gonna go relieve myself. Taking a piss, eh? I'll go too. A piss? You can't say such inappropriate language in front of ladies. Who cares about manners in this place? Roxy was here. He couldn't slip up. Okay, she probably wouldn't think that much of it, but still. Yeah, but you can't say that in front of Roxy. They took turns standing watch while they relieved themselves. Paul then spoke up. You're really struggling with this one. Yeah, it occurred to me that this place might not be the final room of this floor. That maybe there's another route. One that we could have taken in order to get to the boss. Nah, that can't be it. That room is definitely the right place. You're saying that based on what? Nothing. It was veteran intuition then. Not something to be taken lightly. It came from experience. Paul then said, well, no need to get ahead of yourself. We'll wait. If there's something that you're not sure about, something that you want to discuss with us, feel free. Don't try to solve everything by yourself, okay? Understood. Oh, there's one other thing that I want to talk to you about, Rudy. Yeah? What is it? Nah. Not the time right now. I'll tell you about it when we get back to the inn. What is it? Please don't do that. It'll make me nervous if you don't tell me. That's sort of a thing that we call death flag, you know? What the hell is that? Anyhow, if I say it now, it'll only mess with the group's morale. Rudeus thought, mess with morale? Was it anxiety over Zenith? Or maybe something that might make things awkward? Rudeus then spoke up. A reprimand of sorts? Basically, yeah, something like that. Rudeus replied, true. It could really screw things up if we get all depressed and couldn't stay focused in battle. You can get angry at me all you want once this is done. Yeah, this is like something that's again, they're in a different room and they're relieving themselves. And then Paul brings us up. And again, when I read through this, I'm like, he could be talking about, Roxy or something like that. But it's not like completely obvious. But yeah, like the anime right here is like cuts to Roxy. They're not even relieving themselves. Roxy's right there. And then he brings up the whole sword thing. Again, the sword thing is completely anime original. He's like, hey, by the way, I have these 2 swords and they both have different uses. It's kind of like he's talking about, she might be after you, and I don't want to bring things up because it's going to make things awkward. Rudeus is not catching it, though. He's being a clueless protagonist. Yes, the swords indicating Zenith and Lilia, for those that didn't catch it. Paul continued, well, it's not like I'm angry. Just figured I might give you a chance to prep a bit. I hope Mother's safe. Rudeus then said, I hope Mother's safe. Yeah, me too. The air in the room turned oppressive. This wasn't good. Paul had to be feeling helpless, coming this far without results. As Rudeus held watch for Paul, he looked around. He realized the smaller rooms attached to the larger room with the circles was rectangular, not squared like he thought before. He had seen this before, but something was missing. That's right. It looked exactly like the ruins he used to get here. Rudeus rushed Paul back to the group before having Geese search for a hidden staircase. Eventually he found the opening, he blasted it open, and sure enough, there it was. I got a massive kick at the fact that they had the whole backslapping part. I literally was like, oh, they're doing the backslapping part. It's so cute. Every one of them hitting, yeah, good job, man. Good job, man. The music's ramping up and everything. And then sure enough, he looks back to Roxy. Boop. It's so cute. It does have a little more context here. Rudeus glances back, Roxy's tiny hand lifted in the air. As their eyes met, peering up from below her hat, her hand gently stopped against his back, barely brushing against it. There, you did a good job. Her expression was tinged with disappointment, as if she couldn't quite stomach the success of her pupil. every single one of his deeds were directly linked to her, so he didn't see the need for her to feel vexed. Then it hit him. If word of this moment gets out, he'll claim Roxy gave him a hint. And that's when Geese called everyone to stay cautious. At the foot of the stairs was a two-way teleportation circle, one that was deep blood red. Different than all the other circles. Suddenly, it's a deep blood red one. Kind of gives the indication that might be to the boss room and not just all the other circles that they've been getting all the way here. But yeah, super good stuff. Super good stuff. Again, I think the things that I love most about this whole segment is just how much Rudeus sees that Roxy is so much more talented than he is, has like this array of abilities that she can use, and he's realizing, I kind of need to diversify. All I'm using is Quagmire, Stone Cannon, and she's using like all of the things that she has at her disposal. And again, a lot of this is kind of this back and forth between Rudeus and Roxy, and the idea that she is seeing that he is so talented and that she can't do as well as he can, while he's over here going, no, she's incredible. She's taught me everything. She's so fantastic. And yes, in the midst of all that, Rudeus completely missing these signals that Roxy is Doki Doki, which makes you really frustrated. The idea of, can you please tell her that you're married? This entire time, again, Paul's picking up on it. Everybody's picking up on it. Rudeus isn't picking up on it. But the issue here is that he's not telling her, I'm married. And instead, he's asking her questions like, do you think I'm handsome? It's like, gosh, dude. Just like, this entire segment, I just want to strangle Rudeus, dude. You're leading her on. Just stop. It's super frustrating, but it's cute though. It's the Kohai meeting the senpai once again, learning things, kind of a little bit of a wake up call for Rudeus and all this kind of stuff. It's super good stuff. So really great segment. And again, like I said, the anime adapted it so well. It looked fantastic. And yes, all the shots of Roxy. I'm gonna spend probably quite a while today just sitting there clipping and throwing on Twitter and stuff. Just look all these cute shots. Make a montage of cute Roxy moments. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this skip content /impressions video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button before you leave and leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Additionally, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my content. I do skip content video for these series. As we skip chapters, I'll be doing separate videos for those chapters as well. Currently, I think I'm fully caught up, except for some stuff still from the first season that I gotta end up doing. But yes, if you like this content and you want to support this channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips, links, so thanks, membership button below. Greatly appreciate what it does. Until next time, y'all take care.